morning, everyone. How are we doing today? Good. I'm Chef Jude. I'm with Brookdale Apache Junction. This would be our third trip over here today. Today we decided to do something a little simpler and a little fancy, if I may. We're going to do two things for you. We're going to teach you how to make a sangria, a fall sangria, due to the seasonal availability to the apples, and who doesn't like sangria, right? So, really, really simple, really basic, and once again, with these things that we come and we teach you, you can just take a base model and really elevate it and take it to the next level if you'd like to. You can add whatever other ingredients you'd like to, but this is just a simple, basic thing. What we're going to do is we need a big container like such. I have two different apples today. I have a Honeycrisp apple and I have a Gala apple. So they do have a slight different taste in them, but I do want to use that Honeycrisp apple so that way you get a nice crispness to it, and it has a very sweet flavor. Also with our Gala apples, a very sweet flavor as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to take the core out of the apple. If everyone has those little apple cores, you can use that. I like to use this method. It works pretty simple. I cut it in half. I then find where the core would be, take a nice slice, boom, done. Same concept when you're using a pineapple. Real quick, real easy. It's the same idea. Pineapple, pears, apples, all very similar to get small cuts. So today we're going to be slicing these apples in very, very thin slices. What I like to do, it all depends on what you'd like. I mean, if you want a big chunk of a big slice like this in your sangria, you can. I like to cut mine in half this way so that way when I go to slice it thin, you get a nice smaller slice of apple, so it sits in your glass better. Kind of get a little bit more for a little more bang for your buck, if I may. So we're just going to take these apples, slice them up. And again, like I said, you can go as thick as you want. You can go as thin as you want. You can, if you don't, I would recommend chopping them if you don't want to serve them in your sangria and you want it to be a clear without the fruit in it. It's kind of missing the point of the sangria if you don't serve the fruit in it, but you never know. So just keep going, slicing these really thin here. Make sure we mix those up nicely. One more here. All right, once we got our apples sliced, we're going to take a bottle of white wine. Today we're going to be using a Pinot Grigio. This is a very reasonably priced wine. It has a nice crispness to it. It'll also take on the flavor of the apple very, very well so that it's not going to overpower the apple flavor. So 1-to-1 ratio we're going to do. 1 white wine to, we're going to use Martinelli sparkling cider. Gives it a little bubbly. And when you're making sangria, the important part is you want to let it set. You want to be able to infuse all the flavors together, whether you're using apples, pears, grapes, oranges. If you threw a cinnamon stick in here, you want to be able to let that cinnamon flavor come out into the sangria. Mint, basil, it goes on and on and on and on. Whatever you'd like to put in there is what you'd want to do. So we're going to take, the recipe calls for a caramel sauce. When you add this, you want to heat this up so that it's very, very runny. The reason being is once we add this to something that's cold, it will get hard again. So we'd want to make sure that if we're going to add it to here and let it sit overnight, you want to make sure that you heat this up so you can whisk it in. For today, we're just going to do it in each individual glass so that way you'll be able to really taste the caramel apple that we're going for. So once you have your sangria base here, your apples, your wine, your martinellis, we're going to pop this into the fridge. We'd want to let that set for about, I'd say 24 hours. I mean, if you're going to do it, at least minimum 3 to 4 hours to really get that flavor of the apple into the sangria. All right. And as that is chilling and mending together, we're going to move on to the fun stuff. Has anyone in here had banana Fosters before? At your table? You went somewhere and they made it right in front of you and the flame got like this high and everyone was scared, right? So when you add that flame due to the alcohol content in it, it's called flambe. That means to add flame to what we're doing. When you add that flame to whatever it is we're going to do when our flambe, is that you're caramelizing the sugars immediately. So you don't have to cook it down like we did when we made our apricot topping for the baked brie, how we let it cook down and slowly extract the sugars. When you flambe, it happens quickly, real fast. So what we want to do is get our mise en place. We have some brown sugar, our bananas, we have some vanilla, pure vanilla extract, we have just a little bit of salt, we have unsalted butter, that's why we're going to add a little salt to it. And then the recipe calls dark rum or brandy. I myself prefer to use brandy due to the flavor profile. I think it has a better, sweeter taste if you use the brandy than if you use the rum. The rum's going to have more of a spice to it, so that way it'll just different, profile of flavor depending on what you're doing. And then you could serve bananas Fosters over anything you want to, really. Ice cream. Today what I did was I made a vanilla mousse. Well, this is basically an instant pudding pack and heavy cream and just whipped together. So all I do is I take heavy cream, I mix in. If I'm doing like a quart of heavy cream, I'll only use half of your instant vanilla pudding pack. The only thing you're using your pudding pack for is the gelatin in there, so that way it becomes stable, like a blizzard, right? So that way you can pipe it out and it'll set like this until it gets too hot. Other than that, it'll stay like this for hours and hours and hours. So just made a basic vanilla mousse for that today. So what we want to do is we want to get our pan going. We want to get it hot, but not too hot, because we're going to be adding butter. Remember, if we add butter to a hot pan, what can happen? It can burn very quickly. That's right. Very good. And if it burns, we throw it in the trash, because we'll never be able to get that bitterness out. So we'll get our pan going here. We're going to want to use 6 tablespoons. Get that going there. So once we start to get our butter melting really good, then we want to turn that heat up a little bit more. Get our bananas. I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to do this process. Take the top off. Take your knife carefully, make a slit. And when you're going to make bananas, Fosters, you're going to want to use a banana that's a little more on the green side, not so yellow, not too green, because you really want to get a nice ripe banana, but you do want them to be a little more firm because bananas will get mushy when you go to cook them. So as we go to cook them in this process, we don't want them to be too mushy. We want to be able to have a good chunk of banana in our Fosters. So our butter's melting nicely. And from here, you're just going to want to make some nice slices. I'm going to make mine about 1/4 of an inch thick. Yeah, that'll be about good because we want them to break down slightly, but not too much. In this process, you can make them as thick as you want. You don't want to go too thin because, like I said, then it'll just be mushy. You want to be able to have a nice chunk of banana when we serve it over our mousse or our ice cream, or put it in a cannoli shell on top of a sopapilla. It just goes on and on and on. So we're going to take our bananas. We're going to add them to our butter. Get a good caramelization going here. So we get our bananas in that pan, coated with butter a little bit. We want to turn our heat up nice and high. Get that pan hot. From here, we're going to add some brown sugar. About 1/4 of a cup. We're going to add a pinch of salt. We're going to add a little bit of vanilla extract. We're going to give this a toss or a stir, whichever you're comfortable with. Get that nice and coated like that. See how our brown sugar is melting nicely, caramelizing over those bananas. We got a nice hot pan going, because this is where the flambe action happens. Like I said, you don't want to cook with anything you won't drink. So we got a little E&J brandy today. We're going to add it to our pan. There we go. Nice flambe. And all we want to do is just let the alcohol will burn off pretty quickly. So that way the alcohol content evaporates essentially very, very fast, but it's caramelizing those sugars very, very quickly. From there, we're ready to go. Just like that. Pretty simple? All right. Any questions? Yes?
Did you just use 1/4 cup brown sugar? Our recipe says 3/4.
It all depends. I want to let you guys taste it. I don't want to have so much sauce for right now. So the sugar is going to add more. It'll be a caramel sauce, so to speak, because the sugars are going to cook down. I want to be able to have you guys taste it all without making it all soupy inside of here. So that's how we're going to go about that. Yes? Oh, she asked about the recipe. So the 3/4 cup of sugar, and I only did 1/4 cup into this batch here. It's so that way I don't have, see how much liquid I already got in there? If you guys look on our screens here. I don't want it to be too soupy when I go to pour it over this. So then I'll just do a spoon so that you'll get all the flavor there without it just taking over that mousse, essentially. So then, it's the small one. So when you do your mousse, just your hand beaters will work, heavy whipping cream. I mix in I only use half of a pudding pack like that to a quart. And all it is it's the stabilizer. So it just creates it so that it'll do this. And then, because whipped cream will do this, it also adds flavor. So if you want to do chocolate, pistachio, banana, whatever it may be, that's a very, very simple mousse recipe. It's just that pudding pack as your stabilizer and then your heavy cream. Once you go from there, with vanilla, you can add whatever we want to. So whether we're going to go into Christmas and go peppermint, right? So any flavor you want to add adds right to it. When you use the vanilla like that, it works great. Nice cold cup of coffee into a chocolate, and then you have a mocha mousse. Goes excellent right after dinner. Yes. Yes.
Why do you use unsalted butter and then add salt?
So she asked, why do I use unsalted butter and I add the salt? And why not just use salted butter? You could use salted butter if that's what you use in your fridge. In my fridge, I prefer using unsalted butter because sometimes I may be adding something that has a high sodium content to it. Therefore, that is the salt content. The only reason I add a touch of salt during our process here is because that salt, it helps bring out the flavors. So it really enhances the banana, the sugar, the brandy, and it brings them out more as opposed to if you don't use it. So that's why I use unsalted sugar, or butter, I'm sorry. Yes, always use unsalted sugar. And when you're baking, it all mixes in, right? Any other questions? Yes?
How many does this recipe actually make?
For the banana Foster's, we're going to make, about a good, I got a dozen there. That's probably what that'll make right there. And the thickness, so depending on what that one says, how many bananas? 6? 4 bananas. So it all really depends on how thick you're cutting your banana. And that'll determine on whether you're going to have a lot or a little bit. So, and also, it's hard to flambe on an electric stove. So don't forget about that, okay? That's when one of these comes in handy. And then when you do, if you want to get that flambe action, so to speak, right when you pour that alcohol in, you hit it with the fire, and then you'll get that. Because as soon as it hits that hot pan, that evaporation of that alcohol is cooking out very, very quickly. All right, let's take a look at our sangria. Here we go, looking good. So this one I made it yesterday, let it set for 24 hours so that way we can see exactly what the difference. Like I said, let it set for a few hours, that works. But if you do the 24, just let it sit overnight. Basically 24 hours would be a good idea to where you're able to, the sugars are going to break down from your fruit by the alcohol. So it's breaking those down and really incorporating those flavors into our sangria. So if you take a little sauce and you're going to do some fancy artwork, right. You could do stuff like this. Just swirl chocolate, caramel, stick this in the freezer really quick, and then that'll stay like that for a good amount. Probably depends on how hot it is in your house, I guess. But it'll stay at like almost to room temperature for, I'd want to say up to 2 hours. So if you did those ahead of time, you pull them out, then that way your glass isn't all frosty, but you could pour your sangria right in there, ready to go. All right, all right. Here, do you want to dish these and I can do those? Yeah, I just wanted to show you like in the cup, but I'll caramel the top of them so that way you'll get that flavor. Because it is, since our liquid's cold, it's going to firm up immediately as soon as it hits that liquid. You wanna?
What am I doing? I'm ready.
Okay. Here, you'll do some of those. I'll do some bananas. Well, we have this batch too that we just made. I'm just one guy, Renee.
Any more questions about anything?
What's that? I can. What do we think of that? It's pretty good? Excellent. We have any other questions or? We have a saying at Brookdale that when the dining room's quiet like this, it must be good. Shh, it's too loud. Well, once again, I'm Jude, Chef Jude with Brookdale Apache Junction. We thank you all for coming out and spending some time with us, learning how to cook some things, how to make something so simple yet so elegant, and the possibilities that we can take easy ingredients like this and have a little party at your house and wow your guests, make them feel special when they come into your home. Yes, The mousse. Yes, how I made the mousse. It's pretty simple. All I did was I took heavy whipping cream and a instant pudding pack. So instant pudding pack would be just the pudding pack and milk. What I do is I take the heavy cream and I whip it up. Actually, I stir in the pudding pack. I do 1 quart to a half of a small pudding pack. I just take that, I mix it together, and then I just beat it until that it starts to peak up, and you'll start to see it turning into that light, airy consistency, like homemade whipped cream, yet a little firmness from that gelatin in the pudding pack to give it a stable base. And like I said, from there, it goes on and on and on. Whatever ingredients you'd like to add to it. One resident was up here was looking at a simple chocolate one. Very simple, right? Just cocoa powder and powdered sugar and heavy whipping cream and pudding. And it's pretty simple, so. Any other questions before we wrap it up? All right, excellent. Well, thank you all for coming out. Get your flyers. Next month, we're going to be doing some Christmas Eve and Christmas Day meals, appetizers. No, we're going to do the fall, or the holiday warm cocktail and a simple baked, it's basically like baked French toast is what it's going to be like. So, yeah. And I'm going to take that and run with it. So we'll do something fun for a topping or something like that. So in the meantime, you all stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.